Our Across the Aisle segment tonight, President Trump issued a new revised executive order on immigration yesterday. The order freezes the inflow of refugees from any country for the next 120 days and blocks the arrival of travelers from 6 conflict-prone countries for 90 days, notably leaving off the list Iraq. The new order also drops preferences for religious minorities in Islamic countries. Joining me now to break it down, former Democratic Georgia State Representative LaDon Jones. Representative Jones, good to see you.
Hi, Liz. How are you?
I'm doing well. Always better when I'm talking to you. Representative Jones, you and I talked about this last week, and I want to circle back because we had a very productive conversation about it. We talked about the differences in our policy views, but then the differences in our legal views, and how you could come to accept an order that was legally sound in your mind, even if you disagreed with it policy-wise. And I want to ask you, given the revisions that have been made in this second order, what do you make of it? Does this satisfy you?
It doesn't satisfy me, and let me tell you why. For me, it is clear that basically what President Trump and his staff have done have backed into their ideological issues, right? The ideological issue was people from certain countries, people of certain religions are bad, and therefore we want a policy that will effectuate that. And now, because the courts have decided that what they put out, which was honest on its face, I guess you got to give them credit for that, was not legally sound, they have lawyered it up and they have found ways to make it try to fit within the legal guidelines. But at the end of the day, as an American, as a person who knows that this country is a melting pot that said, please bring me your tired and your weary masses, that I know this policy, no matter what words are around it, are still intended to exclude specific people based on their religion, and I cannot support it.
Right. No, and that's the policy aspect. I expected you to say that. I know you don't agree with the policy, but legally, when you look at this, I mean, there's no indication that this has to do with the Muslim religion. I mean, 85% of the world's Muslims aren't impacted by it at all. These 6 countries on the list, and Iraq is left off this new list now in the new order. I mean, these 6 nations, what they have in common is they're either under the control of terrorist organizations or they're torn apart by civil wars and jihadi violence. I mean, to me, it doesn't have anything to do with religion. And that's someone who didn't even endorse President Trump's comments over a year ago when he talked about a blanket Muslim ban. I mean, this seems to be just common sense national security wise.
It would be, except for Trump's administration admitted that the majority of terrorists that come from these countries that have been identified are actually radicalized after they've been in the United States for several years. So that takes away the safety issue. It would seem like a safety issue, except for Trump's own administration admitted that if they don't hurry up and do this, that there will be a slew of people coming into this country. And now this new ban actually comes after there was a stay and then after a several-day waiting period. And so I really have to wonder, I believe that the Trump administration has truly convinced itself that this is about safety. But again, this is simply because in their minds, they have backed into this policy. As a lawyer, right, I can read a law that on its face may check off all of the constitutional boxes. That does not make me still feel comfortable as an American to know that we can support this, even though it technically fits.
Right. No, and I actually agree with you there. That's how I feel about Roe v. Wade. They checked all the boxes to make it constitutional. In my mind, doesn't make it morally right. Doesn't make it constitutional in its essence. And we can talk about that a different day. But the safety aspect. I mean, the original judge that put a stay on the first order in Washington State. He said there's been nobody that's come, no person, no individual who has come to this country from those original 7 nations who has committed a terror attack against the United States. And we found out that's a complete error. There have been 72 people who've been convicted of terror-related charges in our country since 9/11 who've come from these nations. And Attorney General Jeff Sessions said yesterday there are 300 ongoing investigations of individuals from these 6 nations on terror-related charges. I mean, it only took 2 people in San Bernardino. It only took 1 terrorist in Orlando. It only took 19 people to hijack the planes that ran into the Twin Towers in New York City. I mean, 372 people that have either been convicted or under investigation. That's a lot of people. That's a large threat.
It is a lot of people, but then you put it in context of our American society and the number of murders that we have throughout this country, the number of
right. But these aren't American citizens to begin with. These aren't American citizens. I mean, as a nation, we are a melting pot, but we have a responsibility to ensure that people coming into our country don't want to undermine our way of life, don't want to deprive us of our fundamental rights. And when we know that they do, or we don't have a way to determine that they don't, I mean, we can't just let them in and justify that morally by saying, well, people die other ways too.
Which you're almost right, Liz. We have a moral code in this country to ensure that we protect all Americans from all people who wish to do them harm, whether they're from here or from another country. And the problem is that this streamlined focus on people who are from another country ignores the fact that we have American citizens. Trump has made zero policies to come out to say we are going to protect American citizens from people who are committing homegrown terrorism. And when you continue to ignore that issue, when you continue to highlight this, you can't convince someone like
right,
me.
But don't you think that's a separate issue? Again, I don't disagree with you on that. I mean, I think we do need to look at the violence, the murder rates, specifically in Chicago. It's absolutely horrendous. I mean, it's more dangerous statistically to be a black man in downtown Chicago than it is to be a black American soldier in downtown Iraq. It's shocking. We should not deem that to be acceptable within our own country. But it's a pivot. It's a pivot to look at that. Just because something's worse doesn't make it okay for us to ignore this. We know that this is the new threat of ISIS. We know that this is how they're trying to disguise their operatives to get into our nation. I mean, we've heard them say that themselves. Our intelligence agencies have told us that it would be naive. It would be ignorant. It would be neglecting the responsibility of the president to ignore what he knows will be a threat until it actually happens, just because it hasn't happened yet.
Right, but we don't want him to ignore it. But the question remains, why such a streamlined focus? And here's the answer. A streamlined focus on immigrants and people from other countries is based on one thing. That is what got him in office. And at this point in time, it is necessary, whether it be on a Muslim ban or any other issues, that this president pivot from running from office and pivot into being in office. And to pivot and be in office, when he looks at the statistics and he realizes that the number of crimes that are occurring in this country are far, far higher than any other outside terrorism, that he needs to put that much energy into the real issues and not just what he thinks is going to make.
Right, and like I said, I don't disagree with you. I just consider it two different issues, and this is, his primary responsibility is the national security of our nation, to protect us, to protect our nation from terror attacks. But no, I want to go to something that you said just a second ago. You said this is what got him elected, insinuating, I assume, some sort of xenophobia. And I want to ask you, as a friend, to me that seems like a demeaning statement, because, I mean, you know me, I'm not xenophobic, I'm not racist. I support this policy because I think there's a sincere threat against the security of our nation, and that this temporary moratorium on refugees, on immigration from these nations that are known to export terror, will help us protect our country while we improve the vetting process, so that once it's improved, we can accept even more of these people in, because our process will keep us safer. And I do feel that's a bit demeaning to insinuate that a support of this policy insinuates some sort of xenophobia.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, unfortunately, Liz. And I think that at this time in American politics, people have to take a close look at themselves. They have to say, in my own community, on my own street, in my own city, have I seen an instance where someone from another country has caused terrorism? No, I haven't. Now let me look at the crime reports and see what is going on. And then ask yourself, why am I putting so much energy? Why am I in such support of a candidate and now president who supported these issues over in all the other various issues? And you have to check yourself. You have to check yourself and realize, what?
Basically, if I'm interpreting you correctly, you're saying that I'm xenophobic because I care about the 14 people who were killed by the San Bernardino shooter, because I feel grief and sorrow when 49 people were gunned down in a gay nightclub in Orlando, because I'll never get over the fact that when I was 12 years old, 3,000 Americans jumped off the Twin Towers because they'd been attacked by radical Islamic terrorists. That makes me xenophobic?
I think if that issue is your number one issue over what's going on in the cities and towns and what you live in, then yes, I think that one has to check themselves. And let me be fair and let me be honest about my own bias. In my community, which is about 90% African American, there was a young, attractive white guy that walked into the library. And in about 70 degrees, he had on a long coat. And you know what I did? I looked at him real hard. And you know what? I had to check myself. I had to check my own prejudice and say, wait a minute. There is no reason why a white guy in South Fulton County, Georgia, cannot come into this library wearing a long coat. And you
Right.
know where that comes from? It comes from a prejudice that we all have.
Right.
And
It
guess
comes
what?
from implicit. It comes from implicit bias. Nobody's perfect, but I think, with all due respect, that is a very different type of bias than wanting to vet in the proper manner people who aren't citizens of this country, who are from countries that are torn apart by jihadi violence, when we know that the Islamic State terror group who is waging war on our country wants to send their operatives via U.S.-bound refugees into our nation to harm us. That's prudence. It's not xenophobia. Representative Jones, thank you so much for being here. It's great to talk to you.